This was the scene in central Kabul today as U.S. and international forces fought back an attack on the U.S. Embassy compound and the headquarters of the international military effort in Afghanistan. Both were targeted in a sustained and coordinated attack for which the Taliban claimed credit. That said, the deputy police chief in Kabul says he believes a different group is responsible. He's blaming the Haqqani network. This footage is taken from nearby the embassy, from outside a building under construction that overlooks the embassy complex. Afghan officials say they believe that the militants today took positions inside that under construction building as part of their attack on the embassy area because of the clear sight lines they could get for shooting from that high-rise building. Here's the scene on the streets of Kabul near a military hospital close to the embassy complex. According to the latest count from the Associated Press, 7 Afghans were killed in this attack. 15 were injured. No embassy or NATO staff members were seriously hurt. But now look at this video. This video was actually distributed by NATO itself. They sent this out early in the day, very soon after the shooting had stopped. The video is described by NATO as showing ISAF soldiers inside military headquarters in Kabul fighting back against the attack on the embassy compound and the headquarters itself. The interesting thing that happens here, though, is you see these soldiers coming down here, you see in their gear. And then, wait, who are those other guys not in soldier gear at all? Maybe they're soldiers just not in uniforms, or maybe they're contractors whose de facto uniforms in places like this do tend to be polo shirts and khakis, even when they are armed to the teeth. Just a few days into his role as director of the Central Intelligence Agency, David Petraeus on Capitol Hill today told a joint House and Senate intelligence hearing he's looking to use contractors less as a means of the intelligence community saving money. The chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Dianne Feinstein, saying unequivocally at today's hearing that there should be fewer contractors doing intelligence work, that there was a commitment to reduce the number of contractors in intelligence, and that committed reduction is not happening fast enough.
Contractors were tasked to conduct intelligence operations, collection, exploitation, and analysis. And all are critical tasks for the intelligence community and include, I would argue, inherently governmental functions that should be done by government employees at 2/3 less cost per employee. The overall number of contractors is in the tens of thousands. The numbers across intelligence, defense, and homeland security is in the hundreds of thousands. We had an agreement in 2009 to reduce IC contractor numbers by 5% a year, but it's clear that progress has not been maintained and sufficient cuts are not being made.
For those of you keeping track at home, both David Petraeus and Senator Feinstein mentioned saving money as a reason to use fewer contractors. The Project on Government Oversight released a study today on the cost of employing contractors compared with the cost of employing government workers. Quote, our findings were shocking. Pogo estimates the government pays billions more annually in taxpayer dollars to hire contractors than it would to hire federal employees to perform comparable services. Specifically, the study found that the government approves contract rates nearly twice what it pays federal employees to do the same work. So trimming the contractor ranks, it's an issue for the intelligence community. That's what David Petraeus is saying, and now he's head of the CIA. That's why he's wearing a suit, not a uniform. It's also an issue in Afghanistan, where we've still got about 100,000 troops and where we still will have tens of thousands of troops rather indefinitely. But of course, it's also an issue in the places where we are leaving. Camp Victory, the United States military headquarters in Iraq, is getting ready to close. It is literally being packed up to be closed down. One U.S. lieutenant colonel telling the Washington Post this week, quote, this whole place is becoming a ghost town, which says, most importantly, that U.S. troops are leaving Iraq. But how many of the armed polo shirt guys are going to be staying? Joining us now for the interview is Senator Claire McCaskill, Democrat of Missouri, the ranking member of the Senate Government Oversight Subcommittee on Contracting and the co-creator of the Bipartisan Commission on Wartime Contracting. Senator McCaskill, it's nice to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
Your committee has found that the U.S. has lost tens of billions of dollars in contracts and grants in Iraq and Afghanistan. Why are we losing that money? Is it oversight? Is that we're paying too much to contractors to begin with? Is that we're not keeping track of the money once we've handed it out?
I think what has happened is we have become so reliant on contractors. in a conflict situation. And the military really, frankly, wasn't equipped to oversee, to scope these contracts, to pay attention as to how they were spending the money. It was contracting gone wild in theater. There have been some modest improvements made, but the commission, the contracting commission that finished its work last week, has come out with some pretty bold recommendations and some pretty jaw-dropping statistics. Clearly, we've lost close to $60 billion just in fraud and waste in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we've got some issues that we've got to really get to work on if we're going to look at trimming our sails in terms of the deficit.
Is putting a price tag on the contractors issue giving you any more traction with it in a bipartisan way? Is telling people that it's costing us 30, 40, 50, 60 billion dollars more than it ought to be gaining you any political ground in terms of really trying to wrangle this problem under control?
I think it is because, I'm an auditor. I want to do the math. And when you do the math on this, it's not working for the taxpayer. The notion was that we want to keep federal employees down and therefore hire outside contractors. It's cheaper. But no one ever bothered to check to see if, in fact, it was cheaper. And what the report that came out today says, and by the way, POGO is a great nonpartisan group. It is just, they call them balls and strikes. They said, we have now checked, and it's not cheaper. So let's do the math, and let's get the most value for the taxpayer dollar, which in this instance means less contractors, not more.
Senator, I know that your history as an auditor, as you just mentioned there, I also know that I've had enough conversations with you to know that you're also sort of a broad thinker about these things. One of the things I've been thinking about since the 9/11 anniversary is how it could have been different for the country to have felt more connected to the wars that we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. So many members of the military who I have spoken to, so many Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, talk about feeling like they fought those wars on their own and that the country just proceeded as if the nation wasn't at war, just the military was. Do you think that the heavy use of contractors is one of the factors that's made us keep the war at a distance? It doesn't feel like it involves every American?
I think clearly we didn't have enough ground strength to go into Iraq. When President Bush made that decision, the only way they could make it work was through the use of contractors. My dad was a brave soldier in World War II. He peeled potatoes as part of his duty. We never had American soldiers peeling potatoes. We had third world nationals peeling potatoes in Iraq as part of a contracting force. And this giant logistics contract that supported our troops and continues to support our troops in Afghanistan has allowed us to successfully complete some military missions without really having the boots on the ground that maybe would have connected some of these conflicts with the American people more closely.
What do you think it's going to take to change the way both the military and the intelligence community deals with the overall contractor situation? I mean, it hasn't always been this way. It really took a turn, especially with those logistics contracts that you're describing in the Balkans. That's within this generation. It hasn't always been this way. Could we actually make a decision to change this and see things turn around relatively soon?
I think, first of all, we have to, Washington has a bad habit of a very short attention span. We lurch from one topic to the next. Sustained attention span in this area is essential. It's not the sexiest topic. It's one I'm incredibly interested in and want to stay at. We've got to get out of the inherently governmental functions. Security, intelligence. We have got to quit hiring contractors to do those security needs that we have at our embassies, to do our intelligence gathering. And then we've got to look at the oversight of contracting and realize that it is a very wise investment of taxpayer dollars to make sure that every contract has somebody watching it to make sure we're getting value and that we're not giving these guys performance bonuses when they behave badly during their contract, which has been commonplace in Iraq and Afghanistan and, frankly, throughout government.
Senator Claire McCaskill, Democrat of Missouri. Senator McCaskill, we have not always agreed on all sorts of policy things. I think we do agree on this. But I have to tell you, I've never had a conversation with you in which I did not think that you're one of the most thoughtful people in the whole legislature. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. There's big news in the high-profile Massachusetts Senate race, wherein Republican Senator Scott Brown will be defending his seat in deep blue Massachusetts. There's also slightly smaller news, but very exciting news about that big Massachusetts Senate news and this show. That announcement coming up.